If you lose a game in the Cosmic Cup, you're kind of out and that's it. It's like a knockout tournament. Um, and the game kind of mode itself for that is really unique because it's, I don't know if there's like a word for it, but it's kind of like a tug of war system. So if you
Right.
score a point, you'll take a point away from your opponent. And the aim is to be the first to 3 goals or 3 points. But obviously, it goes a little bit back and forth because if someone else scores, they're going to take that point away and you'll be down to, say, 2 goals or something, you would score another one. So that's kind of cool in its own way, too. And if you kind of get through all your games in the cup, then you get a unique trophy for that as well.
Okay. So obviously, we've got the campaign has changed a bit since some people might have played it already on Applicade, and we've done a host of upgrades to the game, not just in the campaign but the game in general. And some of this is adding additional replayability and making sure there is something for everyone, and a lot of stuff for everyone in this upcoming PC and console version of the game. And some of that is the several difficulty levels and several trophies to kind of work toward in the campaign. Can you kind of elaborate on how that works and sort of the I guess the design process that went into making something like that?
Yeah, so I guess in like a traditional sense, it kind of felt right to allow different difficulties in the game, just so it kind of suited all players, and also it gave players who were kind of growing in terms of a skill level to give something better to achieve once they improved a little bit. So you can pick from 3 different difficulties. You've got your bronze, silver, and gold, and that correlates to which trophies you'll get. So if you go ahead and you get first place in the league, you get through the cup and beat all the teams, then you'll get trophies depending on what difficulty you've selected, and that directly scales with the teams that you'll face too. So if you pick gold, that's the hardest difficulty, and you'll get the hardest level of AI that will be trickiest to complete. So each one is kind of a unique experience, really, and you get a unique reward from doing each one. So it does definitely have some different strategy to it and some different replayability as well.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong. There are more teams in the game than you will encounter in a traditional campaign, right? So is there how are those teams picked? Does it pick a random team out of that pool for your playthrough, or does it depend on what you pick, or how does that system work?
Yeah, so there's a pool of teams. Each team kind of has a unique like outfit that they'll wear, so they'll have specific colours you can kind of see on the screen. But you've got like your purple team there. So they'll have their own little kind of branding. They'll have a little logo and their own team name and stuff.
Right.
So the player gets to pick their own team, which to begin with is kind of a pre-selected team with certain characters and weapons. But before each game, you can change it up and adapt and try out other things. So once you've selected a team, there's a pool of all the other teams that kind of goes and gets randomized.
Okay.
And each time you play it, it's kind of a different selection of teams. So depending on what difficulty you play, it might be a unique experience. And because each of those teams has different characters and weapons, they all kind of have their own strategy. So it's quite interesting to come up against those teams and try and figure out what's the best way of taking out these guys with like the hammer and the jetpack. What would work against them?
So
So
I
it
guess
makes each game its own little challenge.
yeah. So I guess that does mean that even playing through the same difficulty twice, it's not just that difficulty. It's kind of there's some nuance in what you actually encounter in that difficulty. So there's even beyond playing through to earn each individual trophy, you can go through several times to try to see how you kind of deal with the various group setups that you encounter, right? And all this obviously prepares you to, take on your friends or take on the world in blitz mode. So you will know, or you at least have the potential to know that by the time you've finished or played a lot of campaign, when you see someone wielding double hammers online, well, you know that maybe I should go this way because I've got experience with that playing against the AI. So kind of it's a low barrier of entry way of kind of learning the ropes that goes beyond the training modes in a more rewarding way, because there are trophies tied to it, and obviously the ability to set a higher difficulty level. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. So my next question, obviously, as you play through HyperBrawl, and this kind of works on across every mode, is that you unlock XP. Can you talk to us kind of about how that system works, and the how it ended up where it is? Like, was there a previous iteration of how the rewards worked in the game? Was there something that predated XP, or did XP maybe unlock something else at some point? Like, how was that kind of changed over time? Unless you just settled on it immediately, maybe. And
I think the XP stuff just kind of went in. It was something that we kind of made the game itself. We kind of fine-tuned the gameplay. But then we wanted a bunch of unlocks in the game. And it just kind of naturally works. I think the way we've built the XP system, it's like a tried and tested method really in other games. So for every game that you play, you'll get a base amount of XP just for completing the game. But then you'll get extra XP if you win the game. If you score goals, you'll get a bunch of XP depending on how many you score. And same with knockouts. So if you get, you win a game, you score 10 goals and get 8 knockouts, you get loads of XP. So it allows players that, you're going to get more XP for scoring loads of goals and doing well. But even if you don't have a great game, you're still going to progress somewhere or another. Yeah,
I was just going to say that this system sounds like I actually have a chance of ranking up, because I'm not going to win. I'm not going to score very often, but I can certainly KO some people.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, we've got our achievements, we've got our leaderboards and stuff. So there's things for people to aim for, but even for players that might be just getting used to the game and trying to get to grips with it, it's something there that is always going to be moving forwards and rewarding the player just for kind of putting the time in. So yeah, from leveling up you get rewards as well, and it's one system for all the modes. So if you play an online game, you'll get XP for that, and then you could jump back into campaign and carry on leveling up. So
is there a difference?
It's always going.
Is there a difference in winning online versus winning campaign, or is a win a win, and then so it doesn't matter what you in terms of leveling up?
A win's a win at the moment.
Okay. So it doesn't matter. Like if you don't feel like taking on the world, you're not penalized for doing that. You just play however you want.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to sort of be kind of favoriting one type of mode and make players feel like, I shouldn't play that mode because it's not as rewarding. Exactly. We want to kind of offer something for every type of player. But there's kind of unique rewards to each mode. Like I say, with the campaign, you've got the trophies. But with the online, that has its own set of trophies as well, and you kind of get your own rankings in the leaderboards and stuff like that from it too. So each mode has its own things to aim for and achieve.
Awesome. Before I jump into the next question, I do want to remind the audience, whether you are watching on Steam or Twitch at the moment, feel free to ask any questions. We've got a number of kind of predetermined topics that we're going to cover, but anything goes. If there's anything you want to know about HyperBrawl, about Milky Tea, about me or Scott, in particular, anything you want to know about game design and what goes into that, and maybe what it's like to be a game designer, drop it in chat and we'll see what we can uncover for you. But so anything goes. pretty much. But yeah, anything you want to know, do let us know, and we'll get to that. So one thing we'll notice on the gameplay we're seeing now, and you've touched on it briefly already. So when you kind of select your team, again, like you mentioned, that team name goes with a specific team color, but team color goes beyond just the heroes. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so you should be able to kind of see it on screen there. Whenever you pick a team, that kind of team color is assigned to. They've got their own little icon in the goal area. The kind of outfits that the characters are wearing all have their own colour, and a lot of the HUD and the UI elements will be specific to that as well. So it kind of makes the mode feel a little bit. It's more unique compared to other modes.
It's very personal, right? You identify with the team and with its colors, and the game is kind of centering around you, around whatever you pick.
Yeah, and I think part of it as well is it kind of gives it more of a sporty feel, but it is part of this this kind of league system, like you would see in a real life sport, something where teams have their own branded. It's something recognisable to the person watching it or playing it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I really like that. We've had. Is this something that has kind of been inspired by player feedback? Because I know that in a previous beta we did have someone asking about the at the time preset colors for most things. Like the teams had certain colors, and that was that. So how is this something that's been changed over time based on player feedback, or how do we? What was the journey like for what we're looking at now? Like the process for where we've ended up, I guess.
So I guess we kind of knew we wanted an offline mode for players to play, something that was kind of quite a long-term mode, something you come back to and keep progressing in, and kind of have its own unique rewards. So it initially started off that we wanted to do more of like a kind of challenge mode or something like that, I guess, where players would be kind of learning skills through doing different sort of challenges that they would have to compete in, which it was quite interesting because we kind of built some like bespoke levels that had certain obstacles and stuff that they'd require you to do a certain maneuver or something like that. But it kind of just became it started feeling more like a training mode. It's kind of what it become in the end. We've got our trials and our advanced trials now, which are training modes that work exactly in that way, that you test specific skills and kind of scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. They teach you very specific things along the way.
So that was like the original idea for campaign. But then, that kind of shifted off to more of a training mode. It just felt like it naturally worked better. And then after that, we kind of had this idea that it was more of a kind of journey through this kind of branching path where you would select teams and be like a bit of risk reward. But it didn't feel like it really fit right with what the game is.
Right.
So we wanted to offer something that is kind of more like the multiplayer experience, and would kind of either offer an offline way to experience that if some players don't really like that type of gaming, or it's something that kind of prepare you for multiplayer. So like you were saying earlier, you could play through the campaign, you could come up against a bunch of different team types and different kind of weapon setups and play through loads of arenas, and then by the time you finish that, you're probably going to feel like, okay, I could go into multiplayer now and feel like I could be pretty competitive. So the way we have it now with the league system, it just kind of felt like it fit with our vision of the game, and also the kind of the theme and the narrative behind the game, as well, kind of becoming the best team in the universe by beating all these other teams as well.
Right. Okay. So one of the similar in terms of design process question that I've got is how do you? So obviously you've you're the core game designer on this game, right? So there's hardly anything in this game that you haven't had your fingers on and haven't influenced in more ways than one, right? So how are you? Obviously, when you set up, I mean, you will know better than me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that when you're kind of planning out what goes into a video game, you're trying to think of what's the player going to want to do and how are they going to kind of get through what the game has to offer. Is there a specific journey in mind for you? Do you have like, obviously the game will automatically put you into the first trial when you first fire up the game. You're presented with the lore, the context, the universe, and you're put in the first trial to kind of just learn the ropes. But beyond that, is there a specific journey you had in mind when you decided what modes go where and what goes into each mode, or is it like up to the player to experiment, like do whatever?
Yeah, I think to an extent, every player is quite unique, and they'll have their own sort of preferences to, some players might just want to get online straight away and just dive right into the deep end, sort of. Whereas
their friends are waiting, right? Their friends are waiting online, so.
Yeah, exactly. So they might just want to jump in and do that. Like when we've taken the game to shows, I'll often say to people, do you want to kind of play through a tutorial, or do you want me to just teach you through the first round? And a lot of players are just like, no, just get me in the game and let's see what happens, which, that's kind of one way to approach it. Whereas some players will want to take the time, be kind of given a few more chances and ways to learn. So there's kind of the option to do both, really. But I guess the optimal way would be, like you say, to jump in, to boot the game up, and see the trials mode, which for anyone that's not seen that's kind of like just going to teach you through the steps of all the basic gameplay mechanics that you need. So it'll teach you how to shoot and aim the ball, it'll teach you how to do the combat, use weapons and everything. And
it'll teach you how to hypercurve, which is like your most important thing, almost.
Yeah, I mean, if you master the hypercurve, you've got it. You'll be all right on that. It is a game changer for sure.
Yeah.
So I think most players they'll play through the initial trials and kind of they'll get the gist of the game. They'll know how to do all the basics, and from there they're kind of free to do whatever they want. We've got advanced trials as well, that's kind of more like a mini game system where it kind of gives you certain scenarios and puts you to the test. It's like a timed get as many points as you can in a minute type thing. So there might be kind of an enemy and a couple of obstacles, and you've got to play off the ball and score as many goals in a minute as you can. So that's something that players could probably jump into straight after the first set of trials and get a better understanding of the game. Or it's something that people could just keep going back to and just practicing. Maybe they're waiting for someone to play the game with, and they might want to jump on and practice something, or maybe they've kind of had a bit of a beating in campaign and you can kind of jump out and practice.
Yeah. Find out what went wrong.
Yeah. So that's quite cool as well. But yeah, like I say with the campaign, I think it gives probably the best sort of vision initially of all the different combinations of teams and arenas in quite a nice, like, simple package that players could play through it, and it'll probably take them a few hours to complete. But by the time they put that time in, they'll have a really good understanding of every other mode then, and I think by the time they go into online, they'll be way better off.
Right.
So I'd say kind of, go through the trials, have a taste of the campaign and try and get a trophy, then jump into online and go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where the real competition sort of begins, I think, is online. And I mean, well, the real competition begins against other players, and obviously online is not the only way to do that. We've got a local co-op mode as well, so you can kind of take on your friends there as well. and again, like, yeah, the online, both the ranked system, the blitz mode that has the leaderboards and everything, but also obviously something we've talked about a little bit in the past. We haven't shown it off really at any point, but obviously our party system and the private match system, allowing people to play with their friends online as well, so sort of in a more low key, potentially low key environment, although it is still all about, kicking some butt in the arena, right? So the stakes might be just as high. There's just it's just you and your friends instead of you against the world. It's completely different. So it's maybe there's a bit more friendly banter between, like, in the private matches than there are blitz mode.
I've seen it become unfriendly for sure. So.
Yeah. I didn't want to call anyone out, but yeah. That comes with the territory. Any good sport and anything that can be competitive, people tend to get competitive, and then sometimes we just say things we don't mean, or maybe we mean them but we don't really mean them.
Yeah.
So let's see here. We kind of touched upon it a little bit before, but can you kind of talk about more of the stuff that, like I mentioned before, we've run a couple of Steam betas already this year, and we are planning more hands-on opportunities for everyone before launch. We will have more details about that, of course, in the weeks to come. But one thing we have always done is listened very closely to the players. The whole point of running betas is to get some feedback and to see what we can make even better. Is there something we've not even thought about that we should implement? All sorts of things. Can you is there anything else you can talk to us about that we've done, or we've changed or introduced or whatever, directly based on player feedback?
From a really early stage, we tried to get people in playing the game, both kind of people returning and playing it a bunch of times, as well as like fresh players. So, kind of soon after we announced the game, we started doing events and going to different shows around the world. So we've had loads and loads of people play it. And, after each show, we'll sort of take on board everything the way that players have reacted to things, what they've liked and disliked, and that's continuously shaped the development for, the entire process. So, whether that's been kind of visual feedback of being able to see what's going on in the arena, whether it's weapon balancing or anything like that. We've kind of had everything, and that's something that we really encourage at the moment, and we want to keep encouraging as well after release and going into the future. So yeah, it's been a continuous thing. It's kind of one of those things that you've got to kind of take on the chin. If some players might all feel a certain way, I really don't want them to know that, but it kind of happens. So
I suppose there is a little game designer in everyone, you know what I mean? Like, everyone has stuff that they like and dislike and their own opinion on why something should be different than whatever it is. And sometimes we just realize, you know what, you're right, and then we change it because maybe they had a brilliant idea. That because obviously we are only us, like, we cannot think of everything, and sometimes we just get a brilliant suggestion from someone who's like, well, we hadn't thought of it, let's do it, it sounds awesome. And other times it's just like when you actually put something in players' hands and suddenly have thousands of people playing, well, suddenly the things that we thought were perfect out in the world is maybe needs a little bit of finessing, maybe needs a little bit of a retouch. One thing we've talked about certainly in the past, and the viewers that might have played previous betas will know that we had situations where we might have had to adjust our weapons, for instance, because in certain scenarios maybe they didn't quite work the way we intended to. And this is why we're doing these betas. This is why the community feedback is so crucial to development of the game, and obviously has been and will continue to be a crucial thing in how we make the game, right? And how we make anything, because we make it for the players and they have to enjoy what it is we put out there, right?
Yeah, and it's always like really, really interesting, especially as a designer, sort of making decisions on a certain, like, the way a character plays, or what's in a certain arena or whatever, and then you kind of let people play it, and they'll do stuff that you didn't actually expect them to, and it's like, oh, okay. Like, one character will turn out to be like, way more powerful than you anticipated. And that's a really cool thing. I mean, in some cases, it does mean we've got to go and fix certain things and balance things, but it's a really exciting thing at the same time, because everyone kind of plays the game in quite a unique way, finds out new tactics and new ways to do things, and it kind of makes the game something that's always like evolving and being crafted around what's really enjoyable for players. So yeah, that's like a really exciting thing that we want to continue to encourage.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I the one of the things we changed, or have looked at and made some adjustments to, is the shield, for instance, that people certainly were able to kind of abuse in certain ways. So and one of the things we did in the most recent beta, actually, is a very specific thing we changed, was the character movement speed. So can you talk to us a bit about how, like, what's changed, and what, like, the thought that went into that? Because obviously players suggested, or some players, again, not everyone, it's not like everyone points to one thing. That's not how it works. It's not quite that easy. But we had some feedback that kind of suggested that maybe we could speed up the gameplay a bit. So what went into that, and how do we decide on the precise change that we ended up making?
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting one, because over time it's actually got quicker and quicker, and whenever we've changed it, it's always been like, whoa, this is too fast. But then you kind of get used to it and it works. So we had the characters all set to the speeds that we were at before the beta, and as people will probably know, each character is quite unique. So we've got different characters that are faster or stronger than others, and a bit slower. And it kind of felt right, but then as people were playing, they were like, well, what if it's a little bit faster than that? Is that going to kind of make it a little bit more exciting and intense? So we kind of got enough feedback, thought, right, let's just try it, because it's something that we can always go back if it goes really, really wrong.
Yeah.
So we just kind of tried bumping the speeds up a little bit, and we were like, wait, we can kind of take this a little bit further. And it just kind of felt right. It felt a little bit more exciting. It felt the kind of adrenaline level went up a little bit. And it kind of fit the nature of the game, really. So it's something that's evolved over time. Obviously, we kind of have to do it step by step so that we don't totally break the game and sort of ruin other mechanics, because we've got the kick in there, which is a bit dependent on speed as well.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that, actually.
Yeah, so especially with the faster characters, their kick distance is kind of quicker, so it takes it further. So when I was kind of messing with it initially, I put it a bit too high, and you would have characters which could literally kick across the entire arena. And it's kind of like, okay, let's tone that down a little bit. So it does have a knock-on effect to other mechanics, but
right.
Yeah, we put it up after we got a bunch of feedback, and it felt really nice. And it's something we didn't consider initially. So it was really cool to kind of get that feedback and take the risk with it, I suppose, and try it out and just see what it was like, because it definitely has improved the game.
Yeah, I mean, I just a personal anecdote, I guess. Literally the very first piece of feedback, the first suggestion I ever made to HyperBrawl was to make the characters faster. So that is literally the first thing I said. So yeah. I'm very happy to see that that's happened. I'm gonna take all the credit for this one. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's a lot of, obviously, game design is making sure that, like you mentioned, that it doesn't break other things, it doesn't mess up everything else. But obviously, I assume there's stuff in here in terms of wanting to make sure that the game remains equally accessible You know, we've made a game that's completely accessible, completely open, and very playable to people who don't play many video games, because you can easily go in and have some fun. And hypercurving, like the act of hypercurving, is very accessible. It's quite easy to pull off. Obviously, it's difficult to get really, really good at, maybe, but it's something anyone can do. So I guess one thing you have to consider when you make characters faster, as well as consider when you make any change, is you want to make sure that you don't make it less accessible, or make it, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to make it less competitive or less. So it's like finding that balance, I'm sure, would be tricky. So it doesn't, change the whole experience too much.
Yeah, like from day one, when we kind of came up with the idea for this game on a piece of paper, that was always kind of the main focus behind it. Was something that anyone could just pick up and just, they'd see the ball in the arena, they'd see the goal, and they'd be like, okay, I get it, this is, and it's quite competitive for them and quite exciting. But then give players that pretty high skill ceiling to stick around and, master that arena, so that they know what the angle is, master the character, so they've got like the best team set up that works for them. And, it's kind of always that everything should be, really easy to pick up and play, but then, it's kind of difficult to master, but still give players the drive to want to master it. So yeah, I mean, you can play the game with like in a super basic way, where you can just run around, you can punch people, you can throw the ball, but then there's loads of other stuff that you can build on once you get used to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the first. I remember the first beta we did run this year. We actually saw a surprising amount of players that didn't utilize certain abilities in the game, and one of those things was hypercurve. There are several people that we saw on live streams. They never curved; they just threw the ball, and that is totally valid. Like, sometimes you might even, pardon the pun, throw off your opponent by not hypercurving, because they're gonna expect that that's what you're gonna do. Like, that's you would think, such a core mechanic, but again, it's not something that's forced upon you. Like, you can curve or you can not curve. That's entirely up to you. So it's interesting to see that people use or don't use the systems in whatever way they see fit. And another thing we saw at the time was a lot of players didn't use. So obviously you have the ability at any time when you're playing, like, regardless of your game mode. If you're playing with a bot, you can take control of that bot, and obviously you can manually change over to take control of it, or you can use a toggle in the settings to have it automatically switch over to the bot when it picks up that ball. What went into making that decision? Like, is the auto toggle there because people didn't use it enough? Is it there just as a sort of accessibility thing? Because obviously, like me personally, I'm quite slow in realizing, oh no, the other bot has the thing. I have to switch over and actually do something. Like, how did that come to be? What went into deciding that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example of the community feedback that we've got, really, because initially the game was built around you would manually switch between the bot and the player, and I mean, that's kind of the way that I still have to play it, and that's why it feels best, because I'm kind of in control of the character. I can choose which one I want, so I might want to let the other guy have the ball while I go
position
knock someone out with a hammer or whatever. Yeah, like it kind of gives me that opportunity to do that, but some players would pick it up and just feel like, I wish it switched to whoever was in control of the ball automatically, and that's the way it works in a lot of other sports games. So to some players, that's just a much more natural way of controlling your team and both characters on it. So we wanted to just give players the option to do both, because it is one of those things that it just kind of feels right or wrong, I suppose. It's kind of like in a lot of games where some people use the inverted thumbstick or something. It's crazy to me, but some people can't play without it. So it's something that you can kind of just practice with and decide which works best for the player. But that was something that was kind of driven from the community and people picking it up first time. So that was really interesting and kind of eye-opening as well.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah, I just want to remind anyone watching, any questions, any additional questions in chat, to throw them our way, and we will discuss anything about the game, anything about being a game designer, or if you have a cool idea for HyperBrawl, we're all ears. Like, again, this is why we are always in close communication with the community, is so we can hear all the great feedback and get some cool inspiration for future things.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's see here. So, in terms of game modes, we've touched upon this a little bit, in that there are ways to play alone, there are ways to play with your friends. You can play online or local or whatever you want, really. Was there ever other game modes that the team has kind of experimented with? Was there something that, again, this happens a lot, I'm sure, something is awesome on paper, but then it's maybe not so cool when you actually do it? What has there been any of that, or has there been some examples of things that the team has wanted to do, but maybe for whatever reason we didn't want to, or something that has been tried and just didn't work out?
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of mentioned earlier with the campaign mode, there is a bunch of different routes that we went with that, with kind of different challenge modes and different sort of player journeys and more narrative options and things. But the one that we went with just kind of suited the gameplay and kind of preparing players the best. But I guess like the main one really was kind of like a custom game mode that we kind of played with the idea on. So I think initially came from like giving me more like tools when I was designing levels and stuff. So the guys sort of created certain things that I could just drop into the level, and I could practice what it was like if the ball had different physics or the level worked in a different way or something.
Right.
And then we kind of thought about it, and we're like, well, what if this became like a custom game mode, where players could choose really like wacky, weird setups to the game, where maybe like your weapon's always charged, so it's a lot more like chaotic and there's loads more weapon usage. Maybe like the ball is just ultra bouncy and just pinging around everywhere. Maybe the spawns work in a different way, so it's kind of players spawn instantly or players take longer to respawn. There's kind of loads of different things that we trialed with, and eventually it became something that sort of became a lot more of a vast mode to create, and we didn't know like how best to tackle it, I suppose, like how limited to be with it, and how like if it could be really silly or not.
I would imagine it's a rabbit hole that can go forever if you let it. Like you can just keep adding crazy things forever, and like it just never ends, because there's so many crazy things you could do in an arena. Certainly. I mean, I will put myself immediately in the camp of let's bring it back, but that's for now. We've got game modes that kind of allow for all sorts of play, and we'll just have to see what may be in the cards for the future.
It's something that we've thought about. We've got ideas, things that kind of work, and it's something that we could certainly consider going forwards. If it's something that people want, then let us know, because it's something I'd kind of like to explore more myself, just because it was kind of, you could create some really like cool, silly games from it that you could try with your friends. So you could change the shape of the ball, for example, so it's a cube shape, and it totally changes the way it bounces and moves around the arena.
Right.
And that kind of creates a totally different way to play itself. Or at one point we kind of had the idea that the ball's kind of like a hot potato, so if you keep holding it for too long, it will just explode.
Right.
So everyone's got to play at like a faster pace to move the ball around and not sort of dawdle on it for too long. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we could do with it. and it's something that it would be kind of cool if to explore that if it's something people like.
Yeah, I mean that sounds very interesting to me. Yeah, obviously, it's. I would imagine one of the reasons that it's not in the game at the moment, at least, is that obviously you have to at some point kind of limit yourself in what you want to do, because obviously otherwise, like, if you want to polish everything and make everything as good as it can be, you have to limit yourself to what you actually include, because if the game has 50 game modes, we've got 50 game modes we need to balance and make fun, and that might be challenging. So I think I would say we probably made the right call in picking what we think is gonna sell the core experience of HyperBrawl and make that as fun as and as tight as and good as can be. And then we'll just again, like anyone in the community, anything people want to see, want us to work on or want us to address, let us know. We're all ears. It's not necessarily a game that just releases and then that's that. We've certainly got plans for some things beyond launch, and so any ideas, any suggestions, do throw them our way. Speaking of things that you've designed or played around with in the past, what's been your favorite thing to design in HyperBrawl out of anything, not just game modes, but like anything?
It's a difficult question.
Pick a favorite child.
Exactly, yeah. I'd probably say the weapons, because the weapons kind of, each one that we've added and each one that we've tried out has really sort of changed the game. So at one point we kind of had like 2 weapons. I think it was the hammer and the grapple claw. And then each time we decided we wanted something new and different, it was kind of this really exciting process of just brainstorming loads of mad ideas and beginning to prototype some of the cooler ones, and seeing which fit in the game. But each time we got to the point where they were kind of polished up and ready to be like really gameplay tested, it just added a new dynamic on how the game played. A lot of times it sort of completely broke the balance, and you would get a weapon that was like you would have to pick that, otherwise you'd lose.
Right.
There's always kind of like you've got to draw it back and make it a bit less exciting or a bit less powerful, maybe. But yeah, like every one has just been kind of really nice to make from start to finish, and really interesting to see how it can affect the game differently, and on the other hand how players can counter that weapon. And you don't want to make a weapon that nobody can counter, because that's going to break the game.
Yeah, exactly.
So like making cool ways of like, you could use the swords to kind of take this guy out while he's like aiming this or whatever, all that stuff. So yeah, I mean that's always been exciting, and then with us doing a lot of shows and online tests and things like that, it's always been really, really cool to see players pick up that weapon and try it for the first time. Like I would use it in a certain way when I've been designing it, but then someone would pick it up and use it completely differently, or develop different tactics with it, and that's always been really cool. And I think the most exciting one for me to initially kind of make was the mag glove, just because it was like really silly but super useful at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's the one where you kind of see it in the gameplay footage, where it creates this like warped effect that magnetizes the ball towards the player's hand. But depending on where the ball's going, how fast it's traveling, it's unique each time you use it. So I've
seen some accidental own goals with that one.
Yeah, that's it. Like you can see the ball free in the air, and you're like, right, I'm going to use my mag glove, and then it just kind of zips back straight past you into the goal.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a way to kind of probably use it in the right way and kind of get really good with it, but it does create some like kind of chaotic moments that are really, really cool, I think.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's probably been my favorite thing.
yeah. I think that weapon in particular, and I'm not saying anyone should do this, but it opens up the door to trolling. You know what I mean? Like the other guy's like, "Oh, you almost got a goal, but no." You know what I mean? Like it's just such a fun weapon because it can be used in so many interesting ways. It just changes up everything. And again, like you have to use it like thoughtfully because it can easily backfire. It's not the only weapon we have that can backfire.
Yeah,
There are certain things that if you don't knock out yourself, you knock out your teammate or both of you. Like you can knock out the entire all four players with some weapons. So you have to be careful how you use things.
yeah. That was like, I guess, an early decision we had was, do we keep the friendly fire on or not? And for me, I've always preferred it because it's just kind of added a really like cool dynamic to the game where you've got to be kind of extra careful that you're not going to knock out your teammate by accident, or
Yeah,
maybe you
it
want to
adds
do it on
risk
purpose,
reward, right?
kind of mess with them. Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of, it creates those really crazy moments where you've got 3 seconds to go and you have to score, and you power up a shot aiming at the goal, and the teammate gets in the way and it knocks them, they're KO'd on the floor there.
Yeah.
It it's always been like, it's always made the game way more exciting, I think. But yeah, it does kind of makes you have to concentrate a little bit more if you want to be super serious and not harm your teammate.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of weapons, I remember we've talked about in a few months back in one of our dev blogs on Steam. We talked about a weapon. You probably remember this. A weapon that was introduced, again, was amazing on paper, but then maybe didn't quite have the the reception that we expected at the time. I'm not sure if you remember what I might be referring to.
It could be multiple things. So.
Yeah, this one in particular was the reverse potion.
Yeah,
it's a thing that again good on paper, but maybe that was it.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, we've gone through the process of creating a lot more weapons than are actually in the game. There's a lot of stuff that was kind of cool, but just didn't work for one reason or another. And I think the main one was probably the reverse grenade. So that worked. You would throw the grenade, and it would create like a smoke cloud on the arena. And if anyone walked into it, it would sort of confuse the character, and your controls would be reversed. So if you kind of pushed up, your character would walk backwards, and vice versa. So on paper, it was like, oh, that's a really cool way to kind of, it can be really tactical and really kind of fun to see your opponent kind of doing the moonwalk in circles while they're trying to get the sort of bearings. But I don't know, we had it in the game for quite a while, actually. I think it went to a lot of shows with us. But it just kind of eventually became something that wasn't that exciting. Like, if you got hit by it, you just kind of, it was really annoying. A lot of people would just kind of put the controller down for a second and wait till it was over. So that kind of made us start thinking a bit more like, if you're going to get hit by a weapon, it's kind of got to be exciting, which sounds weird because obviously you don't want to get hit by a weapon. It's like a disadvantage, but it's going to happen to the player anyway. So we don't want to make something that's just going to frustrate them. So it eventually we just we took it out of the game because it didn't really help the player experience much. Like it was a useful weapon for the guy using it, but for everyone else it was a bit of a frustration, which it just didn't kind of work in the end. But it was fun to try out.
I guess the weapon was different to other weapons in the sense that the penalty received by the recipient of this weapon lasted so long. Most other weapons, if you either get punched, which just does a bit of damage, or most weapons will take you out, but then you're immediately taken out and you respawn a few seconds later. But obviously, if you have something that reverses your controls for a number of seconds, and then maybe you'll even still get knocked out by the very end of that by something else, and you're like, well, I've just lost 10 seconds of gameplay, I couldn't do anything. So I can completely understand the potential frustration there, because the potential penalty was so much longer than everything else is more immediate, and you get back in the action real quick. So you're never down for the count for more than a couple of seconds.
Yeah, and that's such a crucial thing. Like, every second really does kind of count in the game, because the arenas are pretty small, the gameplay's pretty fast. Everything moves at
and now it's even faster
quick pace. So yeah, exactly. So if you're out for 10 seconds, someone could score 3 goals in that time if they're good enough.
Yeah.
So it just kind of it didn't work with the gameplay. But that's kind of one of the cool things about design, is that you learn those things as you progress, and there's nothing wrong with kind of experimenting and trying something out, but there's definitely a point with some things where you just got to think, okay, it doesn't make the gameplay as fun as it needs to be. And then it becomes something else. So we still kept the idea of having a grenade type weapon, and it eventually over time became, we've now got the mine mortar weapon, which you fire it off and the little mine pops out and kind of rolls on the floor, and it'll lock onto like the nearest player, and that can be a friendly, it can be an enemy, and it'll sort of chase them, and if it hits them, it explodes and they'll knock out. That kind of the process of making reverse grenade, fighting with it a little bit and then going, no, it doesn't work, has kind of evolved into making something much more kind of exciting and something that works with the game more in the mine mortar weapon.
Right. Okay, so I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, so let's end on a shorter one, which happens to be the last question I've written down. So it's kind of worked out perfectly. So speaking of things that might not be fun, what's been the trickiest thing to design? What's been the most difficult to kind of get right?
Probably the tutorial. I guess for multiple reasons. I think firstly, designing the game and kind of working on it for so long, I'd like, maybe not to be too big-headed, but I'm pretty good at the game now. So like making the tutorials kind of weird, because you've got to reset your brain a little bit and think, okay, if I'm playing this for the first time, what kind of do I expect to experience, and what's going to be the best way for me to learn it, and at the same time give players a tutorial which is, it's not going to take up all the time, it's not going to feel tedious, it's going to get them into the game pretty quickly, and they're going to know what to do. So if they want, they can play that and go and jump into online, and they can kind of hold their own a bit. But yeah, that was kind of difficult to make it fit in the way that kind of, what are the best things to teach the player in the time that we've got, and what's the best way to help them kind of learn that. And that was always a bit of a tricky thing to kind of get down. But I think we've got it in a way now that, it's a nice quick tutorial which guides you through everything. And it's replayable as well, so you can kind of go through it, and if there's something you're still struggling with, you can go back into the tutorial, and if you want, you can choose a specific sort of mechanic to learn. So maybe if your shooting's not too great, you can just go in the tutorial and do the shooting one and keep playing it and get better. So we got there in the end eventually, but it was kind of a difficult thing to wrap my head around as someone who's really good at the game now, to put myself in the shoes of someone who's brand new to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like trying to realize what did I not know 3 years ago? Like that whole mindset is like, what obvious questions would I have? And I guess that some of that just came from just asking new players to play it. Like, is there something you don't understand at this point? Like, tell us, what we might be starting with, and we kind of make sure that there's something in there helping you out.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing, I think, with game design in general, is making something that kind of fits what you and the team want to do and what feels right. And also, you've got to put yourselves in the shoes of people that are playing the game, and what's going to be the most fun, exciting, cool thing for them as well.
Right.
and finding that balance between what you find really cool and what people play and find cool. And that's kind of the trick to it, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're just about done. So I want to say first of all, thank you, Scott, for joining us. Thank you for all the insight. Again, there's a little bit of a game designer in all of us, so it's always fun to learn about the actual process of designing things and the things you might have to think about that maybe you didn't think about you had to think about. So yeah, thanks again for joining us. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope this was enjoyable. If you have any more questions about the game, feel free to jump on our Discord, discord.gg/HyperBrawl, or just Google HyperBrawl and you'll find our social channels, our website, and everything. Ask us any questions you want. We are currently working toward our summer launch for Steam and consoles. So if you want to get your own hands on HyperBrawl, there's not that much longer to wait. And of course, like I mentioned before, we are planning another beta, so do keep your eyes on that if you want to try it out for free in the not so distant future. So I think with that, we're going to round out here. Thanks again, guys. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.